So once again, welcome back, everybody. And I hope everyone enjoyed that last coffee break and final chance to maybe browse some of the exhibition stands and check out the demos. And it's yeah, good to have everyone back here now for the 10th session of the conference. So we've got 2 sessions left. So shortly for our last session, we're going to be looking at kind of what we're calling bringing it all together, looking at some of the final conclusions and asking some of the different stakeholders very briefly what their key takeaways are from the 2 days of discussions. But before that, we're going to be looking a bit further forward, I suppose, looking forward to the future, but also looking a bit outside Europe and looking at globally how Europe's positioned and how we can maybe look at the strengths we have within Europe and use that to develop global leadership when it comes to space. So delighted, as ever, to have a fantastic lineup of speakers to discuss these issues. And also with us is Linda van Duivenbode. How was that? Was that close? Thank you. So Linda's here as well to moderate the session. So Linda, great to have you here, and I'll pass over to you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, this is the penultimate session. It's about Europe's role in the global space domain, and we're here to discuss the leadership role that we have or would like to take. Just before we start, I wanted to give you a heads up. So we have 5 very interesting speakers who give their opening remarks on the topic. And after that, I want to give the floor to the audience to raise questions, because it's almost the end of the conference, and I really want to give you the opportunity to ask some burning questions that you have. And the other heads up I want to give is, as Dan said, the session after this one is the bringing it all together. Now, we all know that whoever speaks last sticks in people's minds. So if you have really good messages, key takeaways for the final closing session, then also this is your opportunity. So first, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Marjolein van Delen, who is the EU Special Envoy for Space at the European External Action Service, or EEAS. And EEAS is the European Union's diplomatic service tasked with carrying out the EU's common foreign and security policy to promote peace, prosperity, security, and the interests of Europeans across the globe. No small task. So I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Linda, for that introduction. When you read it out, I realize there's a lot to do, and we're not done yet, but we're working on it. So I also want to thank the organizers for inviting me. I think it's a great conference to have here in Brussels, to bring so many actors together and to discuss these issues. Just before, you've heard my managing director, Benedicta Fonseca-Tos, talk about the strategic challenges and how for the EU space has become a strategic domain. So I don't want to repeat that, but that was set out in the strategic compass, from which came the strategy for space security and defense, which basically is my Bible in my job, and then dealing with the foreign policy aspects of that. But I'd just like to emphasize the point that this is not for the fun of policy making. This is what we do. This is a response to a real threat that we see. And that one thing is to have a threat. The other thing is to have a huge impact if that threat would materialize. And that is because of the dependencies. So this is really a response rather than something that we initiated. So the previous panels talked about how security relates to the commercial sector mostly, and what Europe is doing in order to make that sector and the EU space program more resilient. I would like to focus on another pillar of the strategy, which is on partnering, because that is something that I'm fully engaged in and which really is the core of my task as a special envoy for space. It's very clear that we need cooperation with partners. We can't do this alone, even if we try to take a leadership role. This is something where we need our the partners that we ally with involved. Because we need to have shared messaging, we need to do that together. We need to do burden sharing, and we need to burden sharing in capabilities and also exchanging data and expertise. For that, we work very closely together with the US, who is the most important partner for the EU. But we've also stepped up our cooperation with NATO, which is, of course, a security provider for a large number of our member states. And then we also had already a very strong cooperation ongoing with Japan. And we're expanding and building up Korea, Australia, Canada, and now also India. But of course, these are mostly very like-minded countries. It's key that we also keep open channels with not so like-minded countries or even our strategic competitors, because it is really important to avoid unintended escalation and avoid any potential destabilization. So for that, it's not so much cooperation, but it's about keeping open channels. But the third big group that we work with under the chapter of partnership is the large body of UN member states, because the UN is at the core of the EU's activities externally in order to try and get some sort of rules of the road for space. As you all know, there is very little basis for that currently existing. For the EU, the UN is the forum to discuss that. It's not something that we would want to do as a region or in another setting. We need everybody on board for that. And the most pragmatic way forward that we see is to have rules on responsible behavior in outer space. Many of you are quite familiar with that debate. It's been going on for a couple of years. There'll be 5 more weeks of discussions next year about this. But our objective is for that process to help us set an international framework in order to be able to assure security in space. This needs to be an inclusive debate, whether countries are spacefaring or not spacefaring. And that is, of course, because all countries benefit from the data and services they get from space. And that's a key point, and I guess Yolanda will also come back to that. Not all countries realize that they benefit in a great way from space services and data. They don't often realize that many of those are provided by the EU for free in a full and open and transparent way. And that to boot, we provide a lot of capacity building. So it's important that we make clear that this is going on, that there is a lot of support already being given, and that it is very important to be able to safeguard that use of space to all, even to those countries that don't have a huge space program. So my role is, in short, to engage with as many countries as possible in the UN context, next to the partnering with close like-minded, as well as keeping open channel with the not so like-minded, let me call them that way.
Thank you very much for that opening statement, and it sets the scene, I think, for the discussion very nicely. Move indeed now to the European Commission, Jolanda van Eindhoven, Head of Unit for Space Data Economy and International Cooperation at the Director General Industry and Space, or DEFIS. And I understand you also talk about the various partnerships to ensure operations, space components like Copernicus, Galileo, and EGNOS. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Linda, and well, welcome also to everyone who's sitting here. I think what is important is to very much highlight the fact that what the EAS is doing and what the Commission is doing in terms of space is very complementary. We work a lot together, and it is also very important that we work together. The focus for DG DEFIS, in particular as a program manager of our space components, is to make sure that our space components are working. And for that, we do need to partner up with others. Like Marjolein already said, the US is a very important partner. Yes, is a very important partner in terms of our partnership to engage and to share things with one another. So for instance, data. But at the same time, the US also has a navigation system like ours. So we also want to make sure that these things are interoperable, that whatever we do is not fighting the other, but also the other systems in the world, and that whatever device you are having, it doesn't matter which of the systems is on it. It switches and it provides you at that moment with the best service at that moment. So in that sense, we work indeed internationally, also with the not so like-minded countries, in order to make sure that the systems we all have developed are working nicely and smoothly together. This is very important in also order to avoid that whatever you have on your phone is continued to work. Because of course, what happens if something falls away and the other systems, for instance, would not be on offer for you. So this is one part of the job we do internationally to make sure that we actually have these systems which work nicely together. But at the same time, we do offer third countries as well to participate in our space program. This is very important for those who are not members of the EU, so not member states, but who do see the benefit of indeed partnering up with us to, for instance, Galileo or Copernicus or EGNOS. So this is available. We have a couple of countries who have indeed signed up, like Norway, Switzerland, we have Iceland. So this is a possibility as well for third countries. They participate in the program, they follow also the technical developments, very important as well. But at the same time, as Marjolein also referred to, we offer a lot. We offer services worldwide for everyone to use, and we offer data worldwide for everyone to use. And this is also part of the job, to make sure that whatever we have on offer is also used in other countries around the world. The EU decided to set up these systems free of charge for the rest of the world, Galileo and Copernicus. EGNOS is a regional system, but these two systems are there and can help and support countries around the world. So it is important from our point of view to also showcase this and to work on this. We don't do that alone. We, as I said, we do that together with the External Action Service. We do that together with ESA. We do that together with our agency in Prague to make sure that the benefits which come from these systems, because this is a huge investment, but actually also benefit those around the world. And in particular, if we look at Copernicus, a system which has been set up as a more environmental program to ensure that all the societal challenges which we face, which the rest of the world also face, that they can use the data from Copernicus to use that in their decision-making process, but also the services which are on offer from our 6 entrusted entities can be used worldwide when it comes to emergency management, when it comes to monitoring of water, land monitoring. This is very important in order to actually help society as well face these challenges. And this is what the EU tries to do, not to keep this within the boundaries of our European Union, but to have it on offer for the rest of the world and to really face those societal challenges and to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an interesting juxtaposition, I think. I hear threat a lot. And at the same time, extending your hand in cooperation. So that's an interesting balance, I think, also for questions later. Now hand over to Annabelle Fonseca, who's Senior Administrator, External Relations at the European Space Agency. And Ms. Fonseca will mention the institutional cooperation program also, US, Europe, but also other regions in the world. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Linda, and good afternoon to everyone. Very happy to share with you some of our ESA's experience in running partnerships, international partnerships, serving our programs. As you may know, international cooperation is already part of our DNA at ESA. since the start and the origin of the organization as an intergovernmental organization, we had no choice to work with the colleagues from all over the world. And obviously, we started working with the US for the launchers in the sector, but also with Russia, as you know, obviously. And of course, for us in the international relations world, there is an after before the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, because we had to face this tremendous challenge to stop the work with Russia. And for us, being a programmatic agency is really an issue, because as you may know, we also have our European astronauts on board still, and we have also no choice to work with Russia. And this is also why it's a lot of building trust with our partners for this decades, because we started in the 70s to work with these countries. Of course, we had also to support our programs to set up stations, ground stations, like in America, Latin America, Brazil, or Argentina, where we had to build also trust with the various governments. And of course, here I'm bringing a more institutional perspective than the discussions we had yesterday also on the international cooperation. But I think it's also very important that you, industry, also can rely on us as the executive, but also the European Union, to have this institutional cooperation with these various countries. What are our main challenges now ahead? Of course, are to pursue this cooperation with the US. Of course, in the exploration domain, as you know, we are part of the gateway. We are on the critical path of the Artemis program with our European service model, and of course, working hand in hand with the industry, because at the end of the day, our objective is to be able to set up and implement the contracts with the European industry, also to be able to represent Europe when we go abroad. And this is also part of our, at least of my daily job when organizing some kind of making with the industry. For example, now trying to develop with Latin American and the newly created ALCES organization. It's an important part of and obviously we have been mandated by the member states. I think it's also very important to have that in mind, that in the case of ESA, every time we start speaking with a new international partner, every time we set up a new cooperation agreement, even for the sake of our programs, we need to have the mandate and the agreement from all the member states. It's a unanimous decision. And that's why we are now in this challenge and mood of diversifying. You were mentioning India. For us, it's from a programmatic and point of view is an important partner that we are trying to revive, because I checked the first international agreement we signed with an international partner was India in 1976 for a science cooperation. And you can see with the landing on the moon in August, it's a super great achievement. Of course, with China, it's a bit tricky also in terms of geopolitical context, because also our member states asked us not to revive and develop the cooperation for the moment. But again, there, I think because we have a different perspective and we are representing ESA and not a country, we should nevertheless continue to maintain contacts with the colleagues. And you have from China, the National Academy of Sciences, and you have seen this morning, they were able to bring back safely lunar samples from the Chang'e mission. And this is something I think we cannot just close our eyes in Europe, and we should continue at least to tell them that we exist, and we try also to work at some point with in a safe mode and with all these different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess the discussion about political, non-political goes on everywhere. It's in sports, it's in music with Eurovision, as it is here also. The next speakers we've heard now from 3 institutions. We now go to the private sector. So the first of those is Mr. Wolf Kozlowski, who is the managing director of DLR Space Applications Institute, MBH in Germany. And their services cover everything needed for a successful satellite mission, from the very first idea to beyond launch. And they run a 24/7 navigation service provision monitoring the Galileo system operations. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Linda. So a very warm welcome from my side, and thank you for being here, still being here after these two exciting days with a lot of discussions. So it's appreciated that so many people are still in the room. And yes, I'm coming from a maybe different area. We are the operator of the Galileo satellite fleet in Oberpfaffenhofen, and when it comes to cooperation, I can state that we already have a very successful combination and cooperation with our Italian friends in Fucino from Telespazio, where we're operating in 2 control centers, the Galileo fleet. So the cooperation is mandatory for us, for our business. For example, we also have 26 different nations within the company, which shows everyone in, more or less everyone in Europe is present in the company. We need these variety of mindsets of thinking for being efficient and being successful. Bringing in this flavor of satellite operations with all the 24/7 and availability all the time is very important, and maybe is a different view than the agency. So what is important for us for being or seeing the leadership in space, for me, is innovation. Innovation is the key to, let's say, go away in the operations area from the, let's say, Apollo mission operations to a more efficient way. So that's very important. So I think the way where Europe is going with a bit more agile methodology and to be more flexible, dynamic is exactly the right one. What we see from the last proposals which were sent out, there is a need for being more flexible, being more active, and being more dynamic on the market, and that's very appreciated. For this, I think we can, or I can see we have 3 major points to consider for this. I think we have to trust a bit more into our own capabilities. We are not that bad as we make ourselves. So when we look at the Copernicus Earth observation, I think we are first class. We are in the navigation area. We can compete and are even better than GPS. We had an exchange with GPS the other day, and it was very fruitful, but I didn't have the impression that we are second class or third class. I think we are better than we make ourselves. That's the trust. Second is that comes more to the agile and the traditional way of managing projects. I think we have to bridge the gap between the contractor and the supplier. In the current scenario, in many times we have the situation, the one has the contract and the other has to serve the contract, which is not a really efficient way of doing. When you see agile methodologies like Scrum, you bring in the stakeholders on board. You bring in the other part as a contributor of a successful project management. I think that's the key. And there are also some very big projects in Europe which show that it's the right way. And last but not least, I think that I would like to come back to what Timo Pesonen said last year. I think it was in Sevilla, where he said we all, agency side and industry side, we all have to face some risk. What we fear, or I think we fear a lot, is that a risk comes through. For this, we run around with a second source, with a third source, with a air conditioning tripled 4th time, and so on. The question is, can't we go a certain risk? I think it's true. Maybe it comes true, and then we have a problem. But if we duplicate or triplicate the cost for this, I think we have to reconsider this. And then I think to have a good judgment on the risk and what we are willing to take for that would be also something to improve situation.
Thank you for that. now give the floor to Mr. Johan Benaar, who is the Public Policy Director Europe at Amazon. Mr. Benaar will present an industry vision or viewpoint on cooperation and how they contribute to the EU space industry, especially their project Kuiper.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for having me again this year. I would like to indeed present an industry vision on how Europe can shape the future of space. And before I do that, I would like to remind in a few words our contribution to the EU industry. So Amazon, you know Amazon, of course, but what is less known about Amazon is that we are deeply embedded into the EU economy and industry for 25 years now. We have 150,000 employees across the European Union. We also have invested massively in the European Union. I think we are well above 150 billion in just one decade. And therefore, we are today fully embedded into the economy, fully also part of the life of European citizens. And I think what we want to do, what we are already doing with Project Kuiper is also being part of the EU industry, and that's already in the making, I will say. And I'll just take two examples. One is our partnership with Arianespace. We are obviously looking forward to the inaugural flight on July 9th. We today represent more than half of their order book. We have booked 18 launches with Arianespace. In a total, I think that's public information of 30 booked launches, and therefore we contribute to the entire industry through Arianespace, because I think these activities that they are conducting for the launch of Ariane 6 spread across 13 different EU locales and hundreds of subcontractors, and that's obviously fueled by the demand for these launches, and this is something to which we already contribute in a very meaningful way. And we have other partnerships like that. For example, for our dispenser systems, we rely on Beyond Gravity, which is also a European company, to serve their contract with Amazon. They have built a new facility or extended a new facility in Linköping in Sweden that is already that will serve our needs for dispenser systems. So these are just two examples of how our investment does contribute to the EU industry. And that brings me to trying to address maybe, or to start addressing the matter, because we will discuss more, I guess, in the next few minutes. How can Europe shape the future of space? Well, that's by shaping or by building a very strong industry, space industry, and that is a factor of innovation. Are we innovating in Europe? That has been the case so far in Europe very much. You have reminded us of one very great success. Are we building a strong industry and therefore attracting big investments to build that industry? That's also a key question. And to build a strong business case for the space industry, are we maximizing the benefits for people on Earth, for European citizens, which is what, for example, the digital decade is trying to achieve? And I think that's kind of a recipe of how we can achieve that, of Europe shaping the future of space. Can we build a legal and regulatory framework that maximizes all of this, right? And obviously, innovation is global, right? And therefore, we have to leverage on the innovation that takes place in Europe, but also on the innovation that takes place elsewhere. That's critical. Otherwise, we will reinvent at a high cost a wheel that already exists, and therefore, we will not be able to focus on adding to existing innovation. That's also the case for investment. We have to build a legal framework that attracts investment in a way that helps build a very strong European space industry. And finally, we have to maximize the benefits for our European citizens. I think the greatest asset of Europe so far has been the single market. That's also a single market that can fuel the entire EU space industry, and that's by maximizing the benefits and also showcasing these benefits to the EU citizens. Linda, we were discussing how conscious are they before this panel, how conscious are they of the achievements that have already been made? I think that's a critical point. And these are, I think, the three directions where policymakers should look around to see how we can build that framework that maximizes all three dimensions in a way that enables Europe to exert its leadership upon the industry. And that goes with a number of characteristics. I will be short because I'm past time, but that's about interoperability. You said it, Mrs. Ambassador. How do we build something interoperable? That also goes with industry best practices and other factors. But I'll pause here and hopefully we'll have a chance to further discuss.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those opening remarks. As I said at the beginning, I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. I certainly had questions coming up even in addition to the ones I already wrote down beforehand as you were speaking. Does anyone in the audience have a question for any of the panel members? If you do have a question, can you give your name, organization, and also ideally who you are addressing the question to?
Marina Graziano from GB. I have a question, curiosity for Amazon, because I personally am one of the person that does not really like when Europe always look to US or other country, because I think that we are very different. Within these differences, my curiosity, are you planning to somehow import the American way of doing business in Europe? And on the other side, how do you see Europe taking benefit of the American market? We are talking about, let's say, 3-dimension, but then which is the goal? Is importing the American business here, or Europe taking also benefit of the American market? I don't know if you understand my question.
I think so. And it was addressed to Johan from Amazon? Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure it will fully address your question, but what I can say is that the approach, which is our approach, is to look at customer needs and work backwards from that. If I take Project Kuiper, obviously, the customer needs that we see is a need for fast and accessible connectivity, because a lot of activities that you are having yourself, that I am having, rely on good connectivity. And therefore, what we see is that there are hundreds of millions of households on Earth, including in Europe, that still do not have access to fast, affordable internet. And we take it from there. And then we work backwards and we look at what we can do to address customer needs. So I don't view that as any specific to country. I think what we do is that obviously we comply with existing rules in the various geographies that where we operate, and that's also obviously what we do in Europe for already more than a quarter of century, and that's the approach here. That's about looking at customer needs in Europe. There is, I think, a number of data that show that connectivity still needs to progress, and that's the objective, obviously, of the digital decade. So that's something that is acknowledged by the EU Commission. We believe that we can contribute to this, and we can contribute to this with one thing that is, I think, unique to Amazon, which is the focus on the customer, and in the case of Europe, the focus on European citizens and what they need to access to the services that they can find online.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? more or less. Any other questions in the room?
Thank you very much to the distinguished speakers, Alessandro Angelis, JRC. It was really fascinating to hear about the different level of engagements from the different speakers. And I understand there is a level of engagement with US, UN, like-minded countries, at the technological level, at the project level. But I was wondering, are you also experiencing or are you aware of developments in discussing scenarios that could, in a way, outline emerging security challenges and how we could cooperate to address these challenges and potentially discuss mitigation measures? Because, yes, I was just wondering if this was part of the engagement activity that you reported. Because this is emerging and this is quite.
Did you want to address the question to anyone in particular or the
I
three
think maybe
institutions?
the External Action Service and DEF there might be, or I don't know, at the level of European Space Agency, but I think it's more kind of technological cooperation on the side of ESA.
Is the question clear? Are you happy? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just to offer that we don't really discuss scenarios as such, but we do exchange how we perceive the threats landscape, the threat landscape, which is something that is probably comes very close to your question. And with some countries, we have a perception that is very much aligned, with others much less so. And they will see different threats or they will not believe in the threats that we see. So that's when you have to show, well, this is what we see. This is what everybody can see in space that's happening. So this is more or less the level where we discuss, because without a shared roughly shared perception of threats, it's very difficult to move forward on taking measures, especially in the UN context.
Thank you. And you want to? Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can give a concrete example where we are also working together with the Commission on mitigation measures, risks, and international cooperation through the Copernicus program, but also using ESA Earth observation, Earth Explorer satellites. And a very concrete example is working with Brazil for the moment, well, right now exactly. Because we have a new government since 2 years, very much focusing on environmental issues. And because we have been working for the last 25 years together with INPE, the programmatic branch of space in Brazil, we are now able to set up programs, activities where we can work on mitigation for forest fires, protecting the Amazon, land monitoring also with Mexico, just to name another Latin American country. And we are together with the Commission and also with DG DEFIS and DG INPA for the Copernicus-like implementation. We are organizing trainings and on the way and how to use European and Copernicus Sentinel Earth observation data to answer this very specific threat on the climate change topics. I hope, yeah, this is at least one very concrete example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also have some questions. So we are here in Europe, we talk about European leadership with Europeans. And of course, as Rolf already said, we have also a tendency to kind of downplay what we do, downplay what our strengths are. But Marjolein, you travel around the world a lot in your role. So you're kind of like the most non-European in our audience, I would say. When you go out and you represent the EU, what do others perceive to be our strengths? How can we build on how others see us? Do you have a view on that?
When I meet with third countries, I'm very often meet with those people that work on space, with the Space Agency or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Space Divisions. And they are normally very much aware of what it is the EU does and how the EU supports them if they are developing countries. And very often there's an ask for more of that. So that means that, to me, that they see the EU as a provider of services, also a provider that can help them use these services, because it's one thing to have access, it's another thing to properly use it, like the example of Brazil illustrates. So that's the way we are seen. And if we look at the UN context, there very often the EU is seen as a power more or less in the middle, which, because of its cooperation, is a very attractive lead to follow or to engage with or to have a conversation with the issues on the table. Whether we are a leader, because maybe that's what you're referring to, I think we are. I mean, we're not the biggest, the best, but we're pretty good. And I think we should be proud of that, and we should be talking about that. And because we provide these services, third countries see us as a major player.
Any other views on that? The other panelists, feel free also to kind of jump in with a question yourself, if you have it. Rolf, I can sometimes see you kind of maybe wanting to say or ask something. So.
I can just echo what was said. I think there are very, very high performing companies in Europe. And you said, Mrs. Ambassador, that there is a perception of Europe being able to provide great services. And that's exactly what I used as an example during my intro speech about Arianespace being a great asset, the Ariane 6 program, and also with the example of Beyond Gravity. So there is a strength there that has to be leveraged, and I think it's a very important one.
Yeah.
Maybe also an example to mention about this, sorry, external engagement is a side event that we organized together with DEFIS only last week in Vienna, in the margins of a multilateral conference, where we showcased the cooperation that we do, Copernicus in this case, with Panama and Chile on the regional data centers, and also our cooperation with the Philippines, which is in a more nascent state. And we see a very good response from other countries that hear about that see that. It's very powerful if third parties explain it is what they do and what the benefits. So I think we should be doing more of those because there's plenty of examples with plenty of countries to really showcase the tangible results. And then there is an audience for that.
Okay. It does strike me a little bit as if we're being really nice in Europe. And I remember the argument for Galileo at the time was we need the strategic access, the autonomy, because GPS can be switched off, right? That was one of the arguments at the time. And earlier, when we were discussing, you were saying we give a lot away for free and countries appreciate it to an extent, appreciate it. But if someone else comes in and offers something newer, nicer, better, they often have strings attached, and we don't do that. Is that still the right approach to take? I mean, should we attach a bit more strings? We could switch Copernicus off, right? We could switch Galileo off if we. So the threat of being able to do it because you have the autonomy, it's your system. Would that maybe sometimes help us to achieve a bit more?
I think it's not us. It's not us to attach strings to cooperation. And of course, cooperation is a two-way street. And in the example I mentioned about Chile and Panama, that cooperation is valuable for us because we get data back from them. And for an entity like the EU, that is a much more productive way forward than to say, okay, if you don't do what we like, we switch off the data. That's not how we work.
Maybe to add something, I think it's very clear the EU has decided in its legislation it's free, full and open for everyone around the world. So this is a stance which we have taken. And I think it's very important to actually highlight that as well. I mean, we can all think like we switch it off, no Copernicus data because you don't apply the way we want it, or at least you do other things which we don't like. But the downside is that the environment doesn't stop at the border, and I don't think it will stop at the border of the EU when it comes to quality of water, quality of air, and things like that. So do we really benefit from it if we take an approach that we say, no, we don't really like what you're doing, so we switch it off? I think that actually the downside for us is bigger, and I think we all benefit from the fact that although also others take environment, for instance, and climate change very serious. So.
Did you want to come in, Rolf? I can see
Maybe
you.
just a remark on this leadership issue, because I'm just considering we had the GPS engineering in the control center, and I think there's no question of leadership. I think we were, to be honest, we consider ourselves still as the new kid on the block compared to GPS. So our teams were proud as hell when they saw there are areas where we are better. There are areas where they say, okay, automation, we are more advanced, or the accuracy level is better than one. But it's not that we will outperform GPS within the next time. That don't think that should be the goal for us, but to have certain areas where we say, okay, we can be proud of ourselves to be better than them, or to tell them, look, we make it differently, and it's not the wrong way. I think that's the point. So I think Europe, but that's my personal opinion, Europe cannot be the leader in every competence. That's not possible. But we are in some specific areas, we are really good. And I think we have to emphasize on that, and based on that and combined with a good European industry, I think we will play in the future a very good role.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I wanted to come back on your points, actually, both of your points where you mentioned innovation and how we sometimes, again, sort of are not proud enough of what we do. I think in science and technology, Europe has always been seen as a world leader. I mean, I remember always the DGs for research and innovation saying we're not lacking in research capabilities or technology development, but it's that translation to what I consider to be innovation, which is bringing it to the market and being able to scale it. And I was just wondering, we had Galileo. Galileo at the time was initially foreseen as a public-private partnership, but then industry didn't put the money on the table. It became a public program, which I think the hope was to spur industrial kind of revolution from what you were describing, sort of like the more recurring manufacturing industry, to have a more vibrant, dynamic industry. It didn't really pay off. I remember there was a big discussion because, of course, the Commission was in charge of the program, and they don't have geo-return, but procurement. And ESA, of course, has the geo-return. So industry was quite worried at the time that it would not be the geo-return rules, but the open procurement rules from the Commission. So when you say the institutions need the more entrepreneurial mindset, do you think that the industry has enough of an entrepreneurial mindset? With some exceptions, of course, as from eyesight that we saw earlier, that there are some, but on the whole, do we foster that entrepreneurial mindset in the way we finance and support companies?
For me, being in some conferences within the last 2 years, I think a lot is going on in Europe when it comes to these new space company, even though I'm supposed to say there is no new space and old space, but we all know there is. And there's a lot going on with innovative companies with a brilliant mind. So I think there's a lot going on in Europe where a lot of innovation comes into the market. by nature, not everyone will make the race. But I think that's the benefit of this approach, that the best will survive. And we have some companies which I follow since a few years, so they must be successful. And what I heard in this conference as well, there is a potential.
Maybe to say something, I think that this is one of the lessons we learned from the US, that of course there is a different mindset. There is much more money for investment. And I think that's the lesson we learned also from the institutional side, that we need to help those smaller companies, startups, to really scale up and to make it on the market. Because unfortunately, it's not only a question of that if you have a brilliant idea, you will get there. You do need the support also from the financial side to really have the investment necessary. And I think there, the Commission, together with the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund, are really actually making sure that we have a basis to work on that, which is the Cassini program, where we have also the different stages of creating or supporting the companies. And this will continue because we see very much the benefit of these kind of measures, and also thinking about maybe our procurement rules. Is everything fit for purpose? Does it fit a very vibrant and quickly changing industry like space, which is of course also a bit similar for defense in that sense. So these are things where really people are working on to really make it work.
And also maybe bouncing on the European leadership topic, I think that at least from the ESA perspective and as an intergovernmental organization, we have definitely developed, at least in the climate and Earth observation domain, I think we working a lot with the US, with NASA and NOAA. We understand perfectly for the last years that they have been using European data. They even bought, in some cases, very interesting small SMEs companies, European companies, working in the Earth observation domain. And I think, of course, as an international organization, we have to take care of that aspect together with the Commission and protecting the European interests. But if a company wins money, of course, and another company wants to buy it, we cannot just oppose to that decision. I think we definitely, as the executive, have a role to play in an ambitious program to propose to the member states. And I think we are using public money. And I was referring to the Earth observation, but space exploration, space weather is also, I think, an important space safety. And we were discussing that yesterday here, that it's an important topic where we could maybe more interest our member states, but also in the European Union cycle to have more activities, programs. And we are at ESA now trying to propose our member states to finance a mission called the Ramses, to have a rendezvous with an asteroid. And I think I can tell you also that in this case, we have been already approached by the US, by JAXA, by Japan, because we have developed with our previous competencies in the European industry, specific technologies that they don't have. And they would like to have Europe, ESA also financing this specific mission. And of course, we need to take and to make the decision right now, and it's up to our member states again. But I think, again, we have a real role to play, and in some cases related to specific technologies like space weather and space safety. Europe has definitely a word to say.
Okay, thank you very much. We're almost at the end. We have 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask each of you, so it's clear that Galileo and Copernicus have been our flagships. I mean, they're called our flagship program, and they're definitely considered by all of you as flagship programs that have been trailblazers in the world. Galileo, of course, there was already GPS, but nevertheless, still very high quality. Copernicus has a very new idea to share such data so openly. So my question to each of you is then, in a few words, what is then the next flagship for us, for Europe, to build on the strengths from those two? We heard Iris Squared earlier today. Could that be one? I'm myself fascinated by the digital twin, so Destination Europe developments, and I think we can also play a really, really big role there. So just a couple of words, just go down the, if you have any ideas.
To be honest, I think this is more a question for the Commission to answer. I only speak as a citizen, where I would want as many services from space as possible.
Well, this is a challenging one because I think the biggest flagships you already mentioned, but I think the challenge for us in Europe is how do we maximize indeed the data, the services and the products which are delivered. Because I think here in the room, I don't have to, I'm speaking for an audience already convinced, we all see the benefits, but we fail, or maybe we don't, but we don't know that, to reach out and also address these issues to those who can also benefit from it. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges we are going to face, is how do we ensure that for the rest of the world, but also for us here in the European Union, everyone will see the benefits and is going to use it also, whether it is in a company or whether it is at home. But how can you make sure that you benefit from that what is on offer?
Very briefly, because we're already over time. Well, in a few words.
ESA will, whatever will be the flagship. But speaking just about ESA, I just repeat: space exploration, space safety, space weather. Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe a different point of view, as I have a background of computer science, I think the future will be more communication in space. We have not too many interspace links, but we have the technology of optical communications, and to see a communication in space between the assets there, I think that would be the next step for me.
Very briefly, I'll say that I'll go back to customers. I mean, what kind of difference the space industry makes for EU consumers, EU citizens? That's really the key. And I think space-based communications, for example, make a difference to EU consumers. So that's one avenue that should be further explored. I think that's where we can build a strong industry and a strong policy if we are clearly useful to the people.
All right. Well, thank you very much for those final insights, and that concludes the session. So wrap up. Thank you all for being here.